All right, yeah. So we got Nikki's up next because I'm done with my side of things, and Cassandra's got topic, Andrew, and then you're welcome to go after Andrew. So Nikki, you think you got stable enough internet? You can do a screen share.
Yeah, I did curse at my family,
Good. Yeah, I
hence
was hoping.
the muting and all of that. So Tom can thank me that he doesn't have to edit any of that out. And let me share my screen. All right. Can we see it?
Yep.
Okay. There was a
Yep.
silence. I don't like awkward silences. I'm awkward enough without awkward silences. So I do was the paper input stuff because it's the old polymer stuff and we wanted to move ahead. And as I was working on some form related pieces, I thought, well, I mean, I might as well just go ahead and replace that. I was replacing that and I don't have it up. The eco JSON schema form, which generates forms on the fly from JSON. And it was using a lot of the paper components. And I'm like, if I'm gonna translate that, I might as well update everything. So the paper stuff had some really neat little animations on the inputs. There were character counters and character limits with character counters. Some stuff with placeholders and labeling and some auto validation. And you know, some icons that you can put as prefixes and whatnot. There were a ton of just different input types. And what I decided to do when I was redoing the eco form is I created all my own inputs, and what we're seeing here is simple fields. So if I scroll down to, I don't have the data on this one. Let me go to this version. I'm not showing that data. I will just show you in my code view. Actually, I'll switch to that after. It'll be easier just to show the fields first. So this is being generated on the fly. It can be generated on the fly either using the JSON schema or our own haxified version, which is an array of fields. And once you have the array of fields and the values that things are, the form generates itself. It's got, you know, the inputs that look a lot like the paper ones because I cheated. Checkboxes. I've added an icon picker that you saw in Hacks. There's a color picker that goes with something else that I do called Simple Colors. We've got a select list. This is an auto grow text area. Well, it was auto grow. It's not now. I'll have to take a look at that. It also handles the tabs and arrays of items. So the interface for adding new items and deleting them. Date picker, and there's a code picker on here. There's also file upload. So the simple fields is basically taking all of the stuff that we wanted to do, plus all the hack stuff, plus all the forms, and created this this particular piece. But there's a lighter weight version one called Simple Fields Lite. And it's just using a paper or a simple fields container and then just the regular HTML inputs with some styling. So fewer components to use. It's not dealing with the hack schema. It's just dealing with the JSON schema. So this is the little dummy container that you can just throw anything into. And then if you really want to get fancy with fields, I have the one that actually replaced the paper inputs. We now have multi-select, and there
got the validation working too, because I didn't know
that. Yeah, I did.
Nice.
It will validate according to patterns. If it's multiple that's allowed, it will check your minimum and maximum and give a customized message. it will actually check if something's required as well. And then it's got the character counter, but it also has my word counter. If we move over to, so one of the things that this does is it also has these tabs. I don't know if I have a demo on here. It's basically reusing one of my tab components. And one of the things I love about web components is being able to extend an existing component so I never have to do the same work twice. So it's using my Alley tabs and applying it in that tab layout here. And it's also using these, some of the behaviors of the Alley collapse. So that's how I extend things, is to just reuse all my own work. Before I was working on the fields, I was working on this video player, which is sometimes like one of the best things I ever did, and other times the bane of my existence. And the reason it's the bane of my existence is that it seems to be, I guess, like, you know how stores have a loss leader that you put a lot of time and lose effort into, lose a lot of money on initially, but hopefully you get other people into it. That thing, or maybe on so that they'll be your friends and then you can charge them money. Player is this thing that I made because we needed one, and so I looked at Able Player, reverse engineered that, made it look more like a YouTube player but with a searchable transcript. Tried to make it as accessible as possible. Tried to make it as responsive as possible. I can turn my transcript off. I can add it back in. You can print it because we live in the online world, and I just realized I only shared that window. But it is printable, it's searchable. I'm not gonna be able to search it in German, I don't speak German. So it is searchable, and then one of the things we learned is that when we had it tested with a blind user, they wanted to know if we could download the transcript. So the transcript's downloadable, and this is actually responsive. It does audio, it embeds YouTube. So one of the things that my loss leader or free drugs or whatever you want to call it, we don't have to edit that out, is that it does YouTube, and we realized that there is a timing problem in the older version of it now that everybody's hitting YouTube in quarantine. So a lot of what I've been doing is sort of putting out fires to make sure that the video player in this version can deal with timing issues with YouTube stuff coming in. And then another part of my time was because we made this player and somebody in my office said, hey, you know that video player you made, will it work in other content management systems? And I got the chance to say, well, that's the beauty of web components, is they'll work in anything. And then I found out anything meant not like a WordPress or a Drupal, but Omeka S, which I had never worked with before. And so part of my time was spent learning Omeka S to get the video player into their site. So I spent some time, trying to learn Omeka, which is very similar to Drupal, except for with lots and lots fewer documentation pieces. So I was playing template archaeologist. But you'll notice that this player can be branded into different colors. And if I go back to my video player, you'll see that there are all these different themes that you can apply to it. And I wanted to make sure that basically I wanted to save Brian from Brian, and honestly save me from having to do the extra effort of it as well, which means I usually put in a ton of effort to save myself a little effort later. So I don't know how smart that was, but the idea was I wanted to figure out which colors work in which accessible combinations. And so another piece that I had been doing was I had created this whole library of colors based on the materialized colors, but in a way that I knew that if I switched accent color, that the things would be relatively similar in contrast levels. This isn't where it's eventually going to end up. I'd like to be able to do something that does the calculations instead of me manually finding all of these colors. But it was a way for us to get up and running and be able to theme things in a smart way. So let me show the demo here. So this demo. So we can switch it to dark mode and it will automatically switch the contrast of the colors. I can change an accent color, but also hard code so that certain buttons stay the same color no matter what. It was just a chance to play around and figure out what we could do to give the users some choice in hacks without letting them make the choices that make things inaccessible. Because part of my interest in working in hacks is the idea of creating an authoring experience where you don't have to worry about people making decisions that are bad and helping them have choice without, making bad decisions. So those colors are used in these accent cards that I've created, use the same thing, and they have an accent color attribute. They could have a dark attribute and it would make them dark. They're being used in this timeline tool that we've been playing with. And here you can see the accent color is blue. It's also in a carousel and gallery tool that we've created. Again, responsive. Also gratuitous cat and video gaming pictures. And then the thing that I ultimately want to work on, but I had to get the fields working, was I wanted to get to the part where I could make an interface for people to edit tables, because nobody does a good job of making a good user interface for people to edit tables without having to know about accessibility. So I had created this particular piece as a table editor that looks a little more like a spreadsheet with the insertable columns, but it also allows them to add some of the things that they'd like to add. We want them to be able to have headers and footers, so I actually have buttons to help them see what we mean about which things get headers and footers. There, we can have a footer. I wanted to make sure there was a spot for a caption so that they didn't do the cheesy thing where they merge cells like they do typically in CK and TinyMCE. Maybe adjust whether or not they have lines showing up, alternating row colors. That color's kind of light, so it might be hard to see on my screen. The height of the different rows. And then you can see there's this tiny little double line here. That's the ability to turn responsiveness on or off. And so when it's in view mode, it will either shrink down to 2 columns or what it'll do is you'll just scroll across and it's an overflow scroll. There's also the ability to add these little sortable column headers, and that's just a visual to give them the idea that these will be sortable later, and the ability to add optional toggleable filters for their table. The idea being that, you could create something that gives people a lot of options without letting them screw it up. So that's all of the stuff I've been doing.
Nikki, can you go back to the video player?
I can.
So you didn't even hit on this piece, but after hacks,
linking?
No, the progressive enhancement.
Oh.
The fact that you now can insert in there, and you don't have to have JavaScript necessarily running in order for this to still give you the old crappy video player. So I've started doing that with some other elements as well. There's some definitions in hack schema now, Nikki, that might be of interest to you.
Nice.
That when it goes to save, it will inject a comparable version that is vanilla, or sorry, that is light DOM, non JavaScript fallback type of a thing. The meme maker tag actually is the only one that implements it currently. But whenever you whenever you pick an image and meme it, it actually takes that text on save and injects it into the light DOM of the element.
Sweet. Yeah, I've been trying to go back and make sure these things are as progressive as we can possibly make them. The other cool thing about the video player that I didn't bring up is that we were talking about singletons and state management. Ali Media Player uses that heavily. Things like, so basically when a new player is created, it fires an event. There's a single web component called Ali Media State Manager that only creates one instance of itself. It checks to see if there is an instance set. If there's not an instance of itself, it will set one and then set that as the instance. And then any player that advertises itself will first check to see if there is a state manager fired up. And if not, their checking is going to initialize that. And then it will keep track of all of the players that happen to be on the page. And so that way I can do things like make sure that 2 players on the page aren't playing at once. It will, when a new one plays, turn all the others off. The other thing it can do is set a sticky player. So if it's tracking which page is sticking or playing, it can track, where on the page it is, and then set it to sticky. I do have an option in there to turn it off because I've been discovering that people don't understand what it means to be a sticky player. And they're like, oh, this is broken. There's a player in the corner of my screen. But yeah, this is a good example of what we're doing with state management. And then, and like I said, the fields is a good example of what we do by extending classes, which are some of my favorite things about web components that keep me from having to do repeat work. Instead, I'll just set up vast libraries of colors and things that maybe I wouldn't have done if I had to keep repeating myself. That's what I have been working on.